everybody, Kyle Goth here from GoatFilmReviews.com and the Goat Film Reviews YouTube channel, and I've got my first reaction to the new film Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1. This is my second new movie of the day. I just reviewed Scala on a previous first reaction, but I went out to the cinema to catch this film for our upcoming episode of Kyle and Nick on Film. So, gotta say right in the outset, I was excited about this movie. I think the idea, I said this kind of thing about when they pushed Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends because of COVID from 2020 and 2021, I believe, to 2021 and 2022. I was like, you know what they should do? Release one of them in the first week of October and one in the last week of October. I thought it'd be an interesting test because they were intrinsically linked to see if you could get audiences to go see the first one and then come back for maybe a double feature at the end of the month and catch the other one. Similar to what they were doing here, the first one was set to come out at the end of June, second one in mid-August. So I thought that idea was pretty cool. He's filming the third one right now. This seems like a passion project, much like Francis Ford Coppola's film this year, Megalopolis. So I'm all for passion projects. I definitely like to check it out, especially if you're paying a lot of your own money for it. And Kevin Costner has, he's directed some great stuff. He's appeared in some great stuff. I think he's earned the ability to make a movie like this. But I can tell you right now that for 181 minutes, I kept thinking to myself, this could have been shorter. This is a movie that very clearly could have fit into a 90-minute time frame, possibly even less. I think you could have had parts 1 and part 2 of Horizon take up less than 3 hours on their own. Now, again, I haven't seen part 2 yet, and it sounds like I may not get the chance because upon leaving the theater, I saw on Rotten Tomatoes a report that Horizon Part 2 had been pulled from the release schedule and delayed indefinitely. I think their argument was that they were going to wait until enough people had time to experience the first film because it did not do very well in theaters, which makes sense to me. And again, it kind of proves that maybe the idea of trying out that double release so close together may not be inherently a great idea, although this is a case where I don't know that you're going to get people to come back for a double feature of parts 1 and parts 2. The people that missed it the first time around when 2 comes out, I don't think they're going to come and watch 6 hours in a row. Maybe I'm wrong, but as far as it goes, though, this movie is incredibly indulgent, but not in anything that actually tells a story. Like, we get to the end of this 3 hours, and I don't think we've gotten even the beginning of a story. There are character introductions as late as 2 hours into this movie where we're showing new characters again, and I'm like, we haven't even moved the characters in the first couple scenes through to even like a partial story. The big thing about, I criticized Dune Part 1 for this as well, was that it felt like it ended in a place where the story, I didn't like where it ended in terms of the overall narrative of the film. Now, to be fair, at least there was enough in that first 2.5 hours that when it did end, I felt like I'd had some of the story. Horizon Part 1 doesn't even start half the stories it showcases. And in fact, Giovanni Ribisi is credited as being in Part 1. He's actually in the 5-minute long teaser for Part 2 at the end of the film, and that's it. We haven't even introduced one of the other title characters of the film. Not title characters, but like main characters of the film. There's so much, I want to say there's so much going on, but nothing happens. We have a number of different characters. I would say this is probably better suited to introduce 2 stories out of the 4 or 5 that I think are in the film, and then introduce another one in Part 2, introduce another one in Part 3, and kind of bring another one in Part 4, depending on how important they are to your overall narrative. Because we're getting introduced to Kevin Costner's character an hour into the film. We're getting introduced to, I believe, Luke Wilson's character. I think he's like close to 2 hours into the movie before we meet him and his story. I have nothing against the idea of these epics, but like, this doesn't feel like it needed 3 hours for a chunk of time. People are saying this should have been a miniseries. I think it's a perfectly fine reason to have 4 films in this series come out, but there's nothing that happens in this movie. I would struggle to even write a full review about it. I'd have to write part of one, because these movies are inherently, when they're part 1 of like a 2 or 3 or 4 part story, sometimes you can't really fully give in. Like I said, with Dune Part 1, I gave it a slightly lower score because I didn't like where the film left us at the end. But then retroactively, upon seeing Part 2, I appreciated Part 1's ending even more, and I was able to upgrade in my head that review. This is a case where this movie could be far worse after you see the other installments, or far better if you feel like, oh, he was tricking us the whole time and he introduced all this information. But right now, I don't think there's anything in this movie. I'm not sure I could name a character. I'm not sure I could really dive into what the overall story of Horizon is. You know what I mean? Like, you get to the end of the 3 hours, and I'm not really sure what the story is because we've introduced a bunch of people, but there's no story in the movie. I believe Horizon is kind of a town because we see this piece of paper around a bunch of the times that talks about move your family to Horizon. But we don't even spend most of the film in Horizon, nor do we spend time with any of the characters out like in relation to Horizon as the town. Outside of like the opening 45 minutes, there's an extended kind of attack sequence that's done at this settlement. But I still couldn't tell you what the story of this movie is. And maybe I'll retroactively feel different. But right now, Horizon American Saga Chapter 1 is a great way to fall asleep in a theater. I've only gotten up in the movie theater. This is not, anecdote, but I've only gotten up to use the restroom in a movie theater twice in my entire life during the movie. This was one of them because in my head, I was like, I'm not going to miss anything. And I came back and you know what? I didn't miss anything because nothing happens in the 3 hours. It is so frustrating that he's given 3 hours to this movie plus 20 minutes for trailers because that's what's going to happen. So I was in the theater for 3.5 hours and I don't know what I saw. So those are my thoughts on Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1. I did not care for this movie, as I think I've made it clear, and I don't think it's very good, and I don't recommend it. Now, that being said, I do want to see Part 2, because now I've invested the time. So at some point, I'd like to see it released, although, to be honest, Warner Brothers, I believe, was doing the releasing through New Line Cinema, and they haven't released Salem's Lot yet. So let's get that one first if we're going to start pulling things off the release schedule. Let's get Salem's Lot first, and then you can drop Horizon Part 2. And you know what? I'll be there to see it. Hopefully it's correct that it's 15 minutes shorter, because that's an improvement already. So those are my thoughts on Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1. Let me know your thoughts down below. Maybe you love the movie. Maybe you think I'm wrong. That's okay. We can have that kind of discussion. Let me know, and then don't forget to like and subscribe. There are 2 free things you can do that help support the channel immensely, and you never miss new episodes of the show as they drop. You can also check out goatfilmreviews.com for many written reviews. You can find Goat Film Reviews on Facebook. On Facebook, you can follow me personally at Almighty Goatman on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Threads, and you can find my show Kyle and Nick on Film that I co-host with Nick Plotchuk from the St. Paul Filmcast. We have an episode on Horizon and American Saga. Go ahead and check that out, and we'll see you next time.